The morning it began did not feel like the start of a fight. It felt like every other quiet morning I had spent by the lake for decades. The mist lay low over the water, thin and silver, drifting just enough to blur the far shoreline. It muted the world, softened everything, like the lake was holding its breath. I stood on the dock in my slippers, coffee mug warming my hands, listening to the gentle slap of water against the pilings. That sound had been the background music of my life since I was a younger man. Back when my wife Sarah and I first cleared this land and decided that this quiet stretch of shoreline, was where we wanted to grow old together. The cabin behind me wasn't fancy. It never had been. It was solid, honest work. Wood cut, carried, measured, and nailed by two people who didn't know much about building when they started but learned together. Every beam held a memory. Every wall had a story. The boathouse at the end of the dock was the last thing we finished, the project that took the longest because we kept stopping to laugh, or argue about measurements, or sit down and watch the sunset instead of working. When Sarah passed, that place became more than a home. It became proof that the life we built was real, and that it mattered. That's why the flash of orange felt wrong before I even knew what it was. At the far end of the dock, on the door of the boathouse, something bright cut through the gray morning like an open wound. It didn't belong there. Nothing that loud ever belonged on my property. I walked closer, each step tightening something in my chest, and that's when I saw how it was attached. Not taped, not tucked under a door frame. It was nailed. A thick nail driven straight into the wood Sarah and I had painted together years earlier. I pulled it free with my fingers. The nail left behind a small, ugly hole, the kind you can't unsee once you notice it. The paper fluttered in my hand, stiff and official-looking. At the top was a name I recognized only vaguely from hearing neighbors complain over the years. Lakeside Pines Homeowners Association. My stomach sank. I wasn't part of Lakeside Pines, never had been. My land sat well outside their development, separated by woods and distance, and a very clear property line that had existed longer than that association ever had. My grandfather bought this land outright. No covenants, no shared roads, no rules about paint colors or mailbox height. Freedom, written clean and simple on a deed that had lived in my filing cabinet for decades. I scanned the page again, slower this time, trying to make sense of it. Final notice. Unpaid HOA dues. Demolition scheduled. The amount owed was printed in bold numbers, $11,740.26. Specific enough to look legitimate, precise enough to make a person doubt themselves. Beneath it was a list of alleged violations: unauthorized structure, non-compliant dock maintenance, unapproved exterior color. I looked down at the dock beneath my feet, the same one I had replanked myself last summer. I looked back at the cabin, the same brown it had been for 30 years. None of it made sense. At the bottom of the page was the deadline: 3 days. 3 days before they claimed they had the authority to tear down my boathouse. My first reaction wasn't anger, it was disbelief. This had to be a mistake, a clerical error. Someone drawing lines on a map and clicking the wrong parcel. That kind of thing happens. I told myself that as I walked back inside, set my coffee down untouched on the counter, and picked up the phone. The number listed belonged to the HOA office. I expected confusion on their end, maybe embarrassment, an apology even. The phone rang twice before a woman answered, her voice smooth, polite, practiced. "Lakeside Pines, this is Mara. How can I help you?" I explained calmly, gave my name, told her about the notice nailed to my boathouse. I even apologized for bothering her because that's how I was raised. I told her I believed there had been a mix-up, that my property wasn't part of their association. She made a small sound, a soft click of the tongue, like someone disappointed but not surprised. "Oh, Mr. Weller," she said. "Yes, I see your file right here. It looks like you're quite behind on your dues." The way she said it, slow, patient, faintly condescending, set my teeth on edge. "There are no dues," I replied. "I'm not a member. The county plat map shows my property line is outside your jurisdiction." She sighed. Long, deliberate. The sound of someone performing patience. "Well, our records show your parcel was annexed 6 weeks ago following a community vote," she said. "I'm sure you received the paperwork." I hadn't, but she didn't pause long enough for me to say that. "I understand this can be a shock," she continued, her voice softening. "I'll flag it as a potential clerical error. I assure you it will be resolved before any crew is scheduled." Her words were meant to. What followed over the next several days felt less like a dispute and more like a slow, deliberate tightening of a vice. Once the backhoe showed up in my driveway, the tone changed completely. The polite fiction of a clerical error evaporated. There was no confusion anymore, no room for discussion. Everything they did after that was meant to make me feel small, cornered, and powerless inside my own home. The foreman left after that first confrontation, but the threat stayed behind like a bad smell. The tire marks in the gravel, the crushed grass near the edge of the driveway. Even after the truck was gone, I could still hear the low rumble of that engine in my head, replaying over and over. It was the sound of force waiting to be used. I spent the rest of that morning pacing the cabin, glancing out the windows every few minutes, half expecting the truck to come back at any moment. By early afternoon, the phone rang. It was the same woman I had spoken to the day before. Her voice was still sweet, still controlled, but something about it had shifted. There was an edge there now, just beneath the surface, like a smile held too long. "Mr. Weller," she said, "I understand you spoke with our contractor this morning." "Yes," I replied, "and he shouldn't have been here. You told me this was a mistake." "I told you we would look into it," she corrected gently. "Unfortunately, our records still show an outstanding balance. Until that balance is resolved, enforcement actions continue." "Enforcement?" I repeated. "Against property you don't control?" There was a pause, just long enough to feel intentional. "Our legal department is confident in our jurisdiction," she said. "If you disagree, you're welcome to pursue the matter through appropriate channels." That was the first time she framed it that way, not as something to fix, but as something I could fight, if I wanted to. It was subtle, but it carried a message. This problem was no longer theirs. It was mine. That evening, another notice appeared. This time it wasn't nailed, but tucked into the crack of my front door like an afterthought. A second notice. The amount had increased. Late fees, administrative penalties, processing charges. They had added nearly $2,000 overnight, as if the numbers themselves were weapons they could swing without consequence. I read the paper twice, then a third time, trying to understand how a debt could grow so fast when it wasn't real to begin with. It felt surreal, like being accused of a crime that didn't exist, then fined for not confessing to it quickly enough. The next morning, the intimidation turned physical again. I woke to the sound of metal scraping against asphalt, a long, screeching groan that vibrated through the cabin walls and pulled me out of sleep before my feet even hit the floor. When I looked out the window, my breath caught in my throat. A massive dumpster sat across the end of my driveway, not placed neatly to one side, not positioned temporarily. It was dropped squarely across the entrance, blocking it completely. There was no way around it, no gap wide enough for a car, no angle that would let an emergency vehicle through. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a barrier. Spray painted on the side in sloppy white letters were the words, "Property of Lakeside Pines Homeowners Association, debris removal." Debris. That's what they were calling my life. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, feeling something hard and unfamiliar settle in my chest. Fear, yes, but also anger. Cold, focused anger. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about control, about reminding me that they could interfere with my day-to-day existence whenever they wanted. The message was clear. You don't leave unless we let you. By mid-morning, the phone calls started again. Automated messages this time. Recorded voices informing me of escalating fines, of imminent action, of my continued non-compliance. Each call was logged, time-stamped, meant to overwhelm, to exhaust, to make resistance feel pointless. Then came the photos. I noticed the man down the road first. He stood partially hidden behind a tree near the property line, holding a camera with a long lens. He didn't wave, didn't approach, just stood there, occasionally adjusting his position. The lens always pointed toward my cabin, toward my dock, toward the boathouse. He stayed for nearly 20 minutes. Later that day, a new notice arrived, hand-delivered again. This one cited violations based on visual inspection. They had documented peeling paint, unsafe structures, unauthorized materials stored outdoors. I knew exactly when those inspections had happened. I'd watched them through my own window. That night, my name appeared online. Someone had posted photos of my cabin on a community social media page, labeling it a problem property. The caption accused me of refusing to follow community rules, of being hostile and uncooperative.